What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video on my channel. My name is Josh Fan of ShowMeFootball.com, covering your Missouri Tigers. And today I am joined by, of course, Brayden Dowers, or also known as Show Me Baseball, because we do the Dead Birds Discussion podcast for the Cardinals. We used to, I guess. I don't know. We're kind of transitioning into Mizzou, though, just because football season is around the corner. The Missouri Tigers, they play next week, guys. Like, it is that close. Next Thursday, they will open their season against South Dakota. And today, because of that, we are going to do a defensive preview for your Missouri Tigers. Obviously, Brayden, as you know, Missouri had one of the better defenses in the country last year. The biggest reason that Missouri was able to go 6-6 last year was because of its defense. Missouri won games through its defense. We're here to break down whether or not they're going to improve this year, whether they're going to get worse, whether they're going to stay the same. And I'm actually just going to open it with that, Brayden, because I really want to get your take on this. Just right off the top, if you had to guess right now, or if you had to make a prediction, does Missouri's defense improve in 2023? Do they get worse, or do they stay about the same?
After looking over the depth chart and the roster and Blake Baker and just having 8 returning starters from last year, I think that you can really only go up with how many returning starters that we have. I think that the defensive line is a little bit weaker without Isaiah McGuire. He was, I believe, Mizzou's only draft choice in this most recent draft. He had 7 sacks last year. I think our second in sacks only had 4.5. So
that was DJ Coleman, and he's not on the team anymore.
So we're really going to need somebody to step up on the defensive line, whether that be Darius Robinson or new transfer Joe Moore from Arizona State. I don't know, but we're going to need to see somebody specifically at the edge rusher position step up. But when you look into the deeper levels of this defense, you have Hopper, you have Bailey, who are 2 of the better, if not, both of them I'd say are in the top 5 for linebackers in the SEC. And in the secondary, you have Chris abrams-draine and Ennis Rankstraw returning. And Chris abrams-draine is, I'd say, almost going to for sure be a selected in the
day
draft.
1 or 2 pick.
Yeah, he's going to be selected pretty early in the draft, I'd say. And then Ennis, I've always gone back and forth on him on if I like him or not. He had a really rough start to the season last year, and he kind of came off strong in the second half. So if he plays like second half Ennis Rankstraw, then I think that he probably gets drafted as well, day 2 or 3. And I think that if you have a cornerback tandem of 2 guys that are getting drafted, along with 2 linebackers that are probably going to get drafted, or at least Hopper is, I'd say almost for sure. He's one of the better linebackers in the SEC. And a questionable defensive line, but at this point, I trust Blake Baker to get the job done and get the most out of these guys. So I think that this defense is going to improve for sure.
Interesting. I like that answer. I think I agree. I think they will get better. For our breakdown, though, let's just start with the defensive line because you also mentioned them first, and I think they're the most interesting because they were probably Mizzou's best position group last year. At least I think so. You really could make an argument for any of the levels of their defense being the best position group. I think their defensive line was their strongest position group, though, and that seems to be the one with the most question marks heading into this year. Last year, they were awesome. I mean, defending the run, they were 3rd in the SEC in total rushing defense. Tackles for a loss, they were 1st in the SEC. Sacks, they were tied 3rd in the SEC. So they were awesome. Isaiah McGuire, DJ McColeman, Darius Robinson, all those guys were getting after it all year long. And a big part of why this Mizzou defense was able to succeed was because they finally started getting to the quarterback. That was something that a lot of Mizzou fans complained about for several years before last season, is that Missouri kind of lost that D-line Zoo moniker that they held for so many years, back when they had guys like Shane Ray and Marcus Golden and Sheldon Richardson. Since those days, Mizzou has kind of struggled to get pressure on the quarterback. Last year, it was an absolute strength that kind of came out of nowhere. And they saw a lot of guys emerge. And that's why I'm optimistic that this year it can be a similar performance from them, is because it's not like last year we thought all these guys were going to come in and wreak havoc. There was certainly optimism, but we didn't know that for sure. And then Isaiah McGuire took a huge step forward. Missouri's transfers that they brought in, Christian Williams and Jaden Jernigan, ended up being really good for them. DJ Coleman was better than anybody thought. He transferred in from Jacksonville State, Division II, I believe, or FCS, something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, he was awesome. He was second in sacks for them. So I think this year there's a lot of promise. You mentioned Joe Moore, the Arizona State transfer. His dad obviously went to Mizzou. That's a big reason he ended up transferring to Mizzou. He's a local guy. I have high hopes for him. I'm also interested in Niles Gaddy, another transfer that they brought in, who came from Jackson State in Tennessee. I could see him being similar to DJ Coleman, and this guy that comes from a lower level. No one really knows about him, and he ends up being really good for them. I believe he had 7 or 8 sacks last year for Jackson State. Also, Austin Firestone, the Northwestern defensive end transfer. I really like his upside. I believe he's somewhere around 6'5", 260. I'm excited for him. And then this coaching staff has really talked up Johnny Walker, who was one of their underclassmen from last year. He got a lot of run in the bowl game after DJ Coleman sat out. And he showed some flashes. The coaching staff really likes Johnny Walker. I'd expect him to be a guy that really takes a step forward and is one of their better defensive ends. It's a lot of hope. It's a lot of optimism. It's just a lot of unknown, which is why some fans are a little bit concerned, or like you're reserving your judgment just because we don't really know. I mean, we hope they're really good. We hope they can replicate last year. But it's just a lot of unknown. But I really like what this defensive line has. I mean, Christian Williams is back. Jaden Jernigan is back. I mentioned them too. I think Christian Williams is going to be really good. I think he could be an underrated kind of NFL draft prospect. Marquise Gracial, he was a redshirt freshman last year, 4-star recruit coming out of high school. We'll see what he's able to do this year. DJ Wesselak, the 4-star defensive end, maybe he can make his way in there and make an impact.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talent on this defensive line still. Not a lot of returning production on the defensive line, but a lot of talent. A lot of talent. I like what they have. And I think at worst, even if they're not as good as last year, this is still going to be a pretty good defensive line.
Yeah, I just counted while you were talking there, and Mizzou had sacks from 16 different people last year.
Mm-hmm.
And just going down the list, most of them are returning and are on this team. Specifically, when you mentioned, I believe it was Christian Williams, I looked at his stats more in depth. He had 11 run stuffs, which was second on the team behind Tyron Hopper, and he had 7.5 tackles for a loss.
Yeah, I mean, well, real quick, I'm going to cut you off. Like the tackles for a loss, they're creating negative plays. I mean, up and down the roster, there's guys on this team that just create negative plays. Christian Williams, Darius Robinson also had 7.5 tackles for a loss last year. Darius Robinson, I didn't really mention him, but I mean, he's going to be a leader of this defensive line. He might be their best player on the defensive line. He also has inside-outside versatility. Drink and company have talked about using him on the outside, using him on the inside. It just kind of depends. It also depends on who else steps up and allows them to use Darius Robinson fully on the inside at defensive tackle. Also, I know it's not defensive line, but even their linebackers like Chad Bailey had 6.5 tackles for a loss. Martez Manuel is no longer here. He had 6. He was right behind him. Trajan Jeffcoat, unfortunately, transferred to Arkansas, so he is no longer here. But he had 4.5 tackles for a loss, and he only added a sack last year, so I don't think he's irreplaceable or anything. And he was a redshirt senior, or he's like a COVID senior, or redshirt senior, and then I think he's using his COVID eligibility for this year. That's one that the circumstances around his transfer were kind of mysterious. It's like, well, why would he not come back? And I almost feel like Drink kind of.
I mean, he kind of shit talked on Mizzou on the way out too.
Well, and that's why I feel like Drink maybe encouraged him to move on, just because they have these other guys that they want to see. And he's been around a while, and he also kind of regressed last year because he went from having 7 or 8 sacks, I think, in 2021, and then only had one last year, and I think the staff maybe was ready to get their other guys in here.
Yeah, you mentioned that everybody's liking Johnny Walker, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was a redshirt sophomore last year, and he had 2 sacks, 2 tackles for a loss, and 2 run stuffs on just 105 snaps. So if you increase his play time, then I think that he's going to improve. And I do agree with you in saying that Darius Robinson is probably the best returning defensive lineman with 7.5 tackles for a loss, 3.5 sacks, and 9 run stuffs. Because I mean, and like you said, he's extremely versatile and can move all over the field. There's just a lot of guys that you could just rotate in 4 different guys on every single different down, and I'd feel comfortable with getting pressure to the quarterback because it just feels like we're so deep. It feels like Blake Baker gets the absolute most out of every single player that there is, and he did it last year. Like you said, we didn't know that Mizzou's defensive line was going to be a strength, and then Blake Baker in his first year made it one. So I'm not too worried about the defensive line. There is a little bit of skepticism there because it is probably the most weak position with the least amount of returning starters, because when you look in the secondary, you have Ennis, you have Chris Abrams-Draine, and another name that I'd really like to mention is Dalen Carnell, who was a redshirt freshman last year with 3 interceptions. So
we'll talk about him when we get to the secondary. I'm excited to talk about the secondary. Kind of want to look at the linebackers next, and linebacker is also a position that you could make an argument. It's this team's best position, or it's their deepest position.
Mm-hmm.
So you return the 2 starters from last year, Chad Bailey and Tyron Hopper. Tyron Hopper, I believe, is what's the linebacker award watch list? He was on the watch list for the best linebacker in the nation. He was one of the best linebackers of the SEC. I know Pro Football Focus came out with a list with their highest graded linebackers from last season. I want to say Hopper and Bailey were like 1 and 2, if not like 1 and 3. I know they were both really high though. I love what these guys bring to the table. Chad Bailey is more of your thumper in the middle, and Tyron Hopper, he's the perfect modern NFL linebacker. That's why I believe he's going to be a pretty high NFL draft pick next year too, is because the coverage ability with him is off the charts. I mean, he's a very fluid mover, very fluid athlete. He can turn his hips and run with guys. Even Hopper, he had a couple interceptions last year, if I recall too.
I think he had 1 or 2.
Yeah, I know for sure he had one in that first game, because that one was pretty memorable against LA Tech. But Tyron Hopper can move, man, and he adds a lot to this team. I'm excited for him, especially in the second year of Blake Baker's defense. And then behind them, you got Damian Wilson, who stepped in last year when I think Chad Bailey was injured for a couple games. Damian Wilson stepped in. Damian Wilson actually looked really good. And then the coaching staff has raved about newcomer Tristan Newson. Even when they were recruiting him, when he signed back on signing day, they're like, this guy is going to be really good. And I expect him to be in the 4 deep. I don't know how much he'll play, just because your top 2 is pretty rock solid in Hopper and Bailey, but I'm excited for Tristan Newson, and Damian Wilson is also an up-and-comer. And so it's just the amount of depth they have is just – it's awesome, because even if one of those guys goes down, like, you feel good about putting one of these other guys in there. And I'm using Rock M Nation, their returning production charts that they put out, and some of these other charts that they have. And I could have swore Devin Nicholson had transferred the middle linebacker, but they have him on their returning production chart. Devin Nicholson is back. Even Devin Nicholson, like, do I think he'll play really? No, but even he started games a couple years ago when Nick Bolton was still here. He started alongside Nick Bolton. So, like, even if you're getting down to, like, the 5th linebacker on the depth chart, this is a guy who started games and has been serviceable before. I mean, that amount of depth is just insane.
Yeah, I absolutely love good linebacker play. I think that it makes or breaks a defense, and I think that Mizzou is a prime example of that. Going back to that game against Arkansas where Nick Bolton got taken out in the first quarter for a bullshit targeting penalty, then Mizzou's defense just basically collapsed. And Nick Bolton was the captain of that defense. He was the face of that team. And without him, we are completely screwed and let up. I think it was 48 points in that game. And having Hopper and Bailey just be consistently great last year was massive for this defense. Imagine them for an entire another season with the offseason under their belt, more chemistry, more time to work with Blake Baker, knowing exactly what they want to do going into this year and how to get better, not doing something new. I think that, like I said, I think that linebacker play is the most important part of a defense because your linebacker is the captain of the defense. It's the quarterback of the defense. Linebacker, Hopper is insanely good. I think that he's like you said, probably going to be just a modern NFL linebacker. I think that he'll probably be a top 3 linebacker off the board in next year's draft. And Tyron Hopper is probably my favorite player on this team just because of how consistent and all over the field he is, because it felt like he was at every single play in every single game last year. And I'm a little bit more rusty on the depth of the linebacking core, but what you said, I'm excited to see how this unit produces a lot.
Yeah, well, we talk about the defensive line, but the linebackers were a big part of why last year's defense was so good. They were a big part of the reason why they were first in the SEC in tackles for loss and tied third for sacks. They did a great job defending the run as well. I mean, if you just want like a good, set of proof as to why this defense is so good, and if you want to see this defense at their absolute best, just go back and turn on like the Georgia game from last year. Like that defense was clicking on all cylinders. There was not a bad position group on that field. And damn, we should have won that game.
Like that. The defense from last year kept us in a game against the
number one team in the country,
champions, and the only other team to do that was Ohio State. And their defense didn't even hold Georgia to. I mean, Georgia scored over 40 in that game.
Yeah, we were the best team to play Georgia last year. We gave them the best fight, the best competition.
For sure.
And it really sucks that we couldn't have won that game. I mean, not to go off on this tangent, but it sucks that we didn't win that game. One, because I wanted to beat the number one team in the country, but also because that game was at Faroe and the crowd was absolutely popping. And of course, this season, the game's going to be in Athens, Georgia, which I don't feel as great about our chances to win because that's kind of a game that you need to win at home when you're up double digits at halftime, I think it was. So
yeah,
it is what it is. But PFF grades for this defense, I mean, they were 84.7 in rush defense. Linebackers, again, they're a big part of that. And their pass rush grade was 83, which was second in the SEC. You can't put a ton of stock into PFF grades just because they're kind of,
especially
no one really
college grades. They're not anywhere as close as accurate as their NFL grades are, and I don't really like their NFL grades either. I'm not the biggest fan of PFF, but I mean it's worth mentioning at least that.
Well, when it agrees with what the numbers say, that's when you know that you can actually believe the PFF grade. It'd be different if this defense was not good at all last year and they were somehow ranked, 83rd in pass rush, but when it matches the numbers, when it looks good on paper and it checks out, you can go with it. That's how I feel.
Fair.
Let's talk about the secondary. This is probably the most exciting position group on the team. You look at the cornerbacks and safeties. I want to say they have the most returning production out of any of the position groups. I guess linebacker, because I mean, they play 2 guys, and it's the same 2 guys that are back starting. But the secondary returns more guys that played a big part in this defense last year. Jalen Carlise is back for another year. Ennis Rakestraw is back for another year. You talked about Dalen Carnell. He was a redshirt sophomore. And the amount of turnovers that he created and the little amount of snaps that he actually played is pretty crazy. He is just a playmaker. He has a knack for creating turnovers and getting to the ball and being involved in the play. So I'm very excited to see what he can do with increased playing time this year. Chris Abrams and Ennis Rakestraw, they combined for 24 passes defended last year. That's pretty good. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not the best football mind in the world, but Brayden, I'm pretty sure that 24 passes defended between two players is pretty good. So they're, like you said, they're both NFL draft prospects for next year. Ennis Rakestraw, he had a really good freshman year. Then he got injured his sophomore year, kind of struggled after that. But then, like you said, second half of last year really turned it on and became the Ennis Rakestraw that we all saw when he first set foot in Columbia. Drayden Norwood, the Texas A&M transfer from last year, he was a really good depth piece for them. He returns. Joseph Charleston, the Clemson safety transfer from last year, also returns. He was really good for them. I'm also excited about our two transfers from the Florida colleges. Trevez Johnson from Florida, he played over 150 snaps for Florida last year, and he is now added to this defense. Sidney Williams from Florida State. I know there were some talks that he could potentially start over Jalen Carlise. The staff has really liked what they've seen from him. I'm not the hugest Jalen Carlise fan. I know a lot of people have talked about him being an NFL prospect. I don't see it as much with him. He's a good player, but sometimes I'm not a huge fan of the angles that he takes and how he tends to over pursue and gets caught lacking in coverage sometimes. And also there was like a play against Georgia. I mean, we mentioned the Georgia game. There was a play where Georgia scored a touchdown. I think it was in the third quarter, and Mizzou had the running back stopped short of the first down marker. I think Georgia went for it on fourth down is what it was. And they went for it. They stopped the guy. Jalen Carlise was the first player to the ball carrier, had him before the first down marker in the end zone and missed the tackle. And it's stuff like that. It's like, come on, Carlise, like you make that tackle, we probably win that game last year. So I hope Jalen Carlise can take a step forward. And if not, I would love to see one of these other guys try to take that spot from him. Marvin Burks, the freshman, the 4-star recruit in this most recent draft class, he's earned rave reviews in camp for Mizzou. The coaches have talked about him a lot too. He's projected to be in the 2 deep next year, right behind Joseph Charleston. I'm really excited for him. I mean, you just look all over this depth chart for the secondary, and it's amazing what Mizzou brings back this year. And if you want to talk about returning production, look no further than the secondary. I mean, yeah, I love the talent that this group has.
Yeah. You mentioned Marvin Burks. That was the guy that we flipped from Ole Miss, right?
Yeah, flipped him from Ole Miss.
I'm really excited about him. Just hit the energy that he seems to bring. I enjoy. He seems like just that group of Mizzou Twitter players that is always just talking and just hyping up shit on Twitter, like, and just the energy that some of them bring. He contributed to that even when he was projected to go to Ole Miss, and then the Mizzou fan base just bought into it, and he ended up here. Safeties is a little bit weaker with Martez Manuel gone. I really liked him in his time here. But like you said, Charleston is all right. I think that he can improve.
Pretty solid.
Yeah, I mean, he will be good if he starts, but if Burks gets playing time, if some of those other guys that you mentioned get playing time, I think that will be solid. Chris Abrams-Draine and Rankstraw, I think, are one of, if not the best corner duo in the SEC, maybe in the country, because they are both. For sure. Like, if Rankstraw can play like he did against, because he was the one that locked up Jalen Waddle in that Bama game, right?
When he was a freshman.
Yeah, when he was a freshman.
He held his own.
He held his own against Jalen Waddle. If we get that version of Rankstraw again, and he's fine, he's not hurt, and he's healthy the entire year, and we get freshman level, or if we get better than freshman level version of Ennis Rankstraw, along with Chris Abrams-Draine from last year, then we're going to be a no-fly zone. We're going to be a top 5 defense in the country, and I don't really think that it matters how many points the offense scores. I think that we'll be a consistently ranked team if that's what we get. And then pair that with Carnell, who, like you said, just created turnovers all the time. In 352 snaps, he had 3 interceptions and 4 pass breakups, which is insane. for a redshirt freshman, now a redshirt sophomore. He's going to be a game wrecker if he can stay healthy as well. So this secondary is an
he's the big reason.
Yeah.
Sorry. He's the big reason why I'm not like concerned at all about losing Martez Manuel. He played Mizzou likes to call it the star position, and that's what Martez Manuel played. I think Dalen Cornell is going to step in, and he's going to be better than Martez Manuel was. This was also the number 8th ranked secondary in the nation, according to PFF.
From last year?
For this year. This was
for this year, okay.
They ranked.
I was going to say, if they were ranked number 8 last year, coming into this year with all, like literally everybody returning, then I'd say that they're probably going to be number 1.
Yeah. Well, and they were tied third in the SEC for interceptions. They were really good on third down, and a lot of that was because of their passing defense. I mean, one of the things that I enjoyed watching most about this Mizzou defense was how anytime there was like a tough – I mean, look at like the Arkansas game last year, for example, towards the end of the season. Offense stalled out in the second half. Arkansas started chipping away and making a comeback, and all Mizzou's offense had to do was like get one more field goal or run out the clock, and like the game was over. And they couldn't even do that because like I said, guys, Mizzou won games because of its defense last year, and their defense constantly had to carry them. It's like, oh my God, how much longer can their defense hold up? Like how many more times
we're playing Iowa on the football field?
Yeah, and every single time this defense had to go back out there, they held up just about every single time. And it's like, wow, like they're showing no signs of slowing down. And I mentioned the Arkansas game. I mean, Arkansas had so many chances to take that game in the final quarter, and Mizzou's defense just said nope. Every time, either a clutch sack, secondary showing up, batting a pass down, something like that. Like this defense was awesome. They were 34th in the country last year in total defense. That's all of the nation. And think about how much their offense is putting them back out there. Like I'm so excited if this offense can take any sort of step forward, if they can show any signs of progress.
If the offense can be average in the SEC with this defense, like if our offense is ranked 7th out of 14 in the SEC with this defense, I think that we could, like I said, we talked about it in that quarterback video, but 8-4, 9-3, because it's I love watching good defenses because it's a lot more fulfilling knowing that you are making the other team absolutely infuriated because they're not scoring. It's a lot more fun to stop somebody. Like I just find it a lot more fun to stop somebody than it is to score, because just that feeling of not letting them get the enjoyment of scoring a touchdown is so much more than just scoring an outright touchdown. And this defense is, with all the returning talent, I think we've said almost everything there is to be said, but there is so much that they could do this year.
Yeah, with returning 80% of their production last year, like the ceiling is so high for this team. And if the offense just improves marginally, man, like think about how much better this defense could be if their offense isn't putting them back on the field every single game, every single time. Because we were hoping that like their defense would score for them last year. Like that's how desperate we were. That's how bad their offense was. It's like, can the defense please like get a pick six or something? And even like the K-State game, the quarterbacks threw 4 interceptions. They did not do their defense any favors. I'm sure the K-State game in particular really hurt this team's defensive numbers just because the quarterbacks threw 4 interceptions. And I saw some K-State fans the other day on Twitter like talking about how, we hung 40 on that defense. You didn't hang 40 on the defense. You got 4 gifts from the quarterbacks. Because
all of their drives in the second half were from the 25.
They're like inside the 20-yard line.
Yeah. Not the defense's fault at all.
It's definitely not. And then, of course, you got the Blake Baker factor. He got a raise this offseason for a reason, and he is a godsend for this football team, and he was last year. And that's a big reason why I feel like this Mizzou defense can absolutely be better this year, is because it's their second year playing under Blake Baker.
Mm-hmm.
Last year was his first season, and that had been their third defensive coordinator in as many seasons. And a lot of these guys, it's hard to buy in when you're on your third defensive coordinator since you've been at the school.
Respect Steve
And
Wilkes, though.
I liked Wilkes towards the end. I did. But, they bring in Blake Baker, and I'm sure these guys kind of didn't know how to feel about him. I'm sure they liked him, but it's like, not a very strong bond. And then last year, as the year progressed, as they started to understand the defense, they got the defense down, and they started to really make some noise, and things came together. These guys really enjoyed playing for Blake Baker. Anytime they made a big play, you'd pan over to the sidelines, and the defense is jumping around him and giving him high fives and stuff, and they're pumped up. And I think they really, really like playing for Blake Baker, and they're bought in now at this point. They've played for him for a season. And of course, that's disregarding the newcomers because obviously they haven't played for him before. But I'm sure a lot of the reason that they came is because they saw what he did last year, and he has that to sell to them. And I think Blake Baker with another year to implement this defense, it's going to be scary.
I mean, he didn't even think that we are going to get this much returning production. He thought that we are only going to have 5 or 6 guys back, if even that. So for us to get all 8, that shows how much the players have really bought into his system. And I just thought of this while you were talking. If we go 6-6 again, or we go 7-5, or we just have a bad record and fire Drinkwitz, and we don't promote my first choice to promote to make somebody head coach would be Blake Baker, just making him the head coach, because I feel like if we do have an 8-4, 9-3 type season, I think that Baker gets a head coaching job somewhere, and that terrifies me because if we lose him and Drinkwitz doesn't find a great replacement for him, then I think that we regress right back to the mean of being 6-6.
Yeah, you got to take advantage of this year because I think the floor for this defense, the absolute floor, is top half of the SEC. And so that's a defense that you can have a 9-3 season with. You can have an 8-4 season with. You got to take advantage of this year because I do think if it's anywhere close to last year that Blake Baker gets a head coaching job. That's just kind of how the sport works. If you have a young up-and-coming coach that's a coordinator, they usually get a head coaching job. And if Blake Baker puts a top SEC defense, a top 50 defense in the nation back out on the field this year, I think he gets a head coaching job.
Yeah, for sure. So that's really all I have to say is just you have to take advantage of this year. If he somehow is here next year and it's not as a head coach, then take advantage. You have to keep him here as long as possible.
Yeah. And the defense was just
maybe DRF giving him that raise is a good sign of him to stay, but
yeah,
I think
we'll see.
Whenever he goes somewhere, he's going to build a hell of a program.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. I mean, usually some program will come in and they'll offer a lot more than he's making as a coordinator. And that's just kind of how it works. But yeah, Mizzou really wasted this defense last year. Point blank, they wasted this defense and what they did. I mean, the offense that they had paired with this defense was just embarrassing. So hopefully they can take advantage this year, man. If anything, it'll be fun to watch this defense again.
Yes. I will be there in person watching it on Thursday.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be awesome. Hopefully they go out there and crush South Dakota, and hopefully we'll have some answers on. Hopefully we'll have some answers on the offense.
Yeah,
but maybe we'll do an offensive preview later this week or something because we need to get to them because there's a lot to talk about regarding the offense. But yeah, guys, I think that all but wraps up our defensive preview for the 2023 Missouri Tigers. But with all that being said, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Mizzou fans can find this. Make sure you check out my work on showmefootball.com. And then, of course, Brayden, did you have anything you wanted to plug? Twitter, anything like that?
I'm just going to keep plugging Show Me Movies. Go watch
Show Me Movies. Okay. Movies. Yeah, Brayden wants you guys to check out our movie review channel. It's Show Me Movies, just like Show Me Football. So, yeah, go and check that out. I'll link that in the description, actually. I think I forgot to do that last time, but I'll link it this time so you guys can go directly to that if you want. But, yeah, man, that's it. So, take care. We'll see you all in the next one. MIZ.
ZOU.